Socialist realism, art of the ideal. When I was a child visiting my grandmother in Vilnius, our trolleybus rides always took us across the Green Bridge, over the river Neris. The bridge was guarded by four massive, imposing statues, bronze figures of farmers, soldiers, and workers. They seemed to loom over me, so dominant and menacing that they made me feel tiny. Now I recognize them as powerful expressions of socialist realism. But for my grandmother, and for many older generations, those statues carried something heavier. They looked at them with a kind of melancholy, reminders of their hardships under Soviet rule, but also of their youth. To them, the Green Bridge was not only a crossing over the river Neris, it was an anchor, tying their personal memories to a larger story of survival in the USSR. The Green Bridge statues were not unique. They were a piece of a much larger story. In the early 1930s, a new artistic doctrine swept across the Soviet Union, socialist realism. Officially announced at the First Congress of Soviet Writers in 1934, it became the only sanctioned art style in the USSR. As Boris Groys writes, in The Total Art of Stalinism, Stalin approved this slogan, socialist realism, and proclaimed it mandatory for all Soviet art. This doctrine, first given its form for literature, was then superimposed on the arts with no alterations whatsoever. Its mission was clear, to depict life not as it was, but as it should be under socialist realism art. Art had to be realistic in form, but optimistic in spirit. It was not a means of personal expression, it was a tool for state expression. Socialist realism was born from more than politics. It was also about environments. The Soviet Union was vast, stretching across forests, steppes, mountains, and industrial cities. Leaders understood that controlling the image of these spaces meant controlling how people imagined the empire itself. A single canvas could inspire pride, strengthen belief, and unify millions under a shared vision. Workers became heroes, farmers, providers, leaders near mythical guides. Environments were not just backdrops, they became tools of empire, landscapes recast as symbols of progress. These are a couple of examples of paintings. Morning of our motherland. Stalin stands in a glowing field as dawn breaks, tractors and power lines stretching into the distance. The rising sun promises not just a new day, but a new era, with the leader as a shepherd of progress. Lenin in Smolny. A quiet office, Lenin seated at his desk. Authority shown not through grandeur, but through calm steadiness. Leadership as wisdom and clarity. Rest after battle. Soldiers sit in the snow, sharing bread. Heroism is not triumph, but endurance. The resilience of ordinary men holding the line. Low marks again. A domestic scene. A boy returns home with poor grades, his siblings and dog reacting with humor, a reminder that even family carried lessons about discipline and self-improvement. New Moscow. Through the windshield of a car, the capital gleams with fresh construction, a romantic vision of urban life, brimming with energy and promise. At the construction site. Muscular workers on scaffolds, buildings reaching upward, industry itself becomes heroic, the bones of socialism rising from the ground. Stakhanovets, smiling faces of labor champions, exalted as nation's heroes, individual workers transformed into symbols of collective achievement. Moscow Metro. The Moscow metro stations were designed not just for transport, but as deliberate collections of public spaces portraying the strength and might of the Soviet Union. Each stop was a monument in its own right, created to demonstrate to the Soviet people their power and the power of their nation, the ambitious ideals they were collectively striving for in their communist dream. Young Steel Workers is a striking Ukrainian example of how socialist realism celebrated the next generation of industrial laborers. It shows youthful figures in steel plant bathed in light and energy, embodying both strength and optimism, the future of socialism forged in fire. The defense of Sevastopol. Explosions, chaos, bodies in struggle, a portrayal of both destruction and unyielding courage, urging viewers to stand firm at whatever cost. But socialist realism was not confined to gallery walls. It lived in streets and squares, in murals, subways, and towering statues. The Green Bridge in Vilnius, rebuilt in 1952, bore four such ensembles: student youth with books in hand, on guard of peace, soldiers at rest, agriculture, a man and a woman with wheat, and industry and construction, workers with tools and blueprints. Each group turned ordinary figures into allegories of Soviet ideals. Together, they watched over the city, silent reminders of the empire's vision of itself. For decades, the Green Bridge statues stood as landmarks, but for many Lithuanians, they were also symbols of occupation. In 2015, the city removed them, citing safety concerns and the need to confront their ideological weight. Today, they remain in storage, uncertain whether they are historical artifacts to preserve or relics to be best left behind. The legacy of socialist realism is complex. It was an art of remarkable skill, but also of strict control. It reveals the ideals a state wanted to project, and the truths it often ignored. Environments shape these visions. The sunlit field, the city under construction, the river crossed by statues. Empire used these spaces to anchor its memory, its power, and its promises. For some, these works are nostalgia. For others, they are wounds. But in every painted sunrise or cast iron figure, we see the same truth. Art is never neutral. It carries messages of hope, of power, and of empire. The question is not only what do we see, but whose vision are we remembering? This is a list of references that I used to complete this video.